Hi, this is Oleg Pinos. We continue our video series on practical project evaluations using genomics. Let's set the stage. A field has been discovered, it looks promising and everyone's excited. But here is the catch, we only have 2 wells, not nearly enough to move straight into development. This is what we call the appraisal stage. And make no mistake, it's probably the riskiest phase in the oilfield life cycle. Why? On one hand, high-stakes decisions on major initial investments like surface facilities must be made. On the other hand, uncertainties are at their peak and underestimating them can lead to costly, sometimes irreversible consequences. We've seen it happen. There are documented cases where companies invested heavily in facilities and equipment early on, only to discover later that the reserves were insufficient to support the planned production. The result? Millions wiped out. Losses that simply didn't have to happen. The lesson here is simple. Don't gamble and spot the main risks early. That's where appraisal comes in. In the following example, the approach was clear. Analyze uncertainties upfront and build a structured appraisal plan that cuts risk step by step. Normally, that kind of analysis takes months, but with genomics applications, the calculations were done in just days. The risks mapped, the path is clear. Let me show you how. Here is the case. A mid-size oil field, 3D seismic in hand, but just 2 wells across 20 square kilometers. A lot of ground with almost no control, and yet the operator was ready to skip appraisal and go straight into development. You can already sense the danger. Too many unknowns. The message is simple. Don't ignore appraisal when uncertainties are high. The geological overview made one thing clear. The biggest unknown is the distribution of net pay or net to gross ratio across the field. We focused on this parameter to show its financial impact. Now let's check how this may vary in both directions. The first case is the well data average shown on this map. This is a likely scenario, but we must also consider the extremes, both low and high values, since they are also possible. For example, if this is a continuous shore phase phases, we can expect high values even beyond the well control. That's the extreme high net to gross case. But if it's a channel, we may expect the lowest thickness outside of it, the extreme low case. As a result, the probabilistic distribution of reserves and NPVs for the project are quite wide. And next step, we identify the key financial risks. In our case, the largest upfront cost is building the surface facilities. Now let's look at what might be a reasonable capacity for the facilities. We take the average case and review 3 facilities options. 6,000, 10,000, 15,000 barrels of oil per day, or BOPD. Each comes with a very different cost and bring different values. The winner here is clear. 10,000 BOPD bringing in 212 million. Go bigger, you're down 17 million. That's over-design. Go smaller, you miss out on 58 million. That's under-design. Okay, 10K BOPD looks optimal for the mean net gross case. But what if net pay and the reserves turn out different? That's where it gets interesting. Let's see how the picture changes under those scenarios. Say we go with 10K BOPD. If net pay turns out high, NPV hits 234 million. But with 15K BOPD, it jumps to 302 million. What does it mean? 60 million left on the table if we go 10K. A classic case of under-design. Now flip it. If net pay turns out low, the smaller 6K facility actually gives a better NPV. Go bigger and we may waste up to 26 million. That's over-design. The bottom line, non-optimal design costs real money. And we are not talking small. It's 26 million at best and up to 68 million at worst. That's why appraisal isn't optional here, it's critical. Okay, let's compare the alternatives. Build the facilities right away on average geology or take the time to run an appraisal program. The number speaks for themselves, and about 7.5 million for appraisal wells versus potential losses that are 4 to 10 times higher. When we enter appraisal, the goal is simple: turn on the lights in a dark room. We reduce uncertainty step by step to make the right facilities decision. We should stop appraisal once adding more light no longer changes what we see, and the key development decisions remain the same. And the same 3 questions always come up. Where do we put the wells? How many do we really need to bring the uncertainty down? And what kind of facilities and capacity make sense for the outcomes? Let's walk through it. Now first question, where should we drill? We start with the average NTG map and simulate how it might vary using a stochastic algorithm. This gives us a map of standard deviations, a measure of uncertainty. The logic is simple. Place the first well where uncertainty is highest. If this well shows low values, the NTG map updates like this. We map the deviations again, and that points us to the second well. Update the map again, and the process continues. Then comes the third well, and so on. As you can see, the standard deviation goes down as we drill more wells. So how many wells do we need? Is 3 enough for appraisal? Let's check it on this scenario tree. If the first well is low on NTG, the field average drops to about 0.4. If the next well is also low, it can fall to 0.26. But if the second well is high and the next one too, NTG jumps to 0.51. And in between we get outcomes like this. But the situation could turn out more optimistic. If the second well is high, the field average jumps to 0.66 and could edge up to 0.68. On the other hand, if the second and third wells are low, NTG may fall to 0.5. So this branch spans a range from 0.5 to 0.68. Now we should calculate the economic outcome for each option, testing different facility capacities. Say we go with a 6K BOPD capacity and the economics practically flattens at an NTG of around 0.5. Beyond that, additional reserves don't add value. It's underperformance zone. With 10K facility, we capture clear upside, but below 0.31 NTG, it underperforms the previous option, as you can see. And 15K BOPD works best once NTG reaches about 0.58 and higher. To summarize, these are the turning points for optimal facility sizes. Now let's put those on the scenario tree diagram. We drill the first well, and facility alternatives of 10 and 15K BOPD emerge. The second well adds a 6K BOPD options. Drilling a third well makes no difference here, so 2 appraisal wells could be sufficient in this situation. However, if the outcomes evolve differently, a third well may be required to justify the choice between 6 and 10K. We then check the higher NTG options the same way. Here we see alternatives between 10 and 15K. Drilling another well adds nothing, so 2 wells are enough in this case, but in the other case a third well is clearly required. And finally, this roadmap shows the key decision points. Depending on the outcomes, 2 to 3 wells are enough to define the right facility size and avoid costly mistakes. In conclusion, going straight into development is a gamble that can cost millions. On the other hand, appraisal is like turning on the light in a dark room. Step by step, the picture becomes clear. We keep adding light until there is nothing more to reveal. Only then the time comes for full-scale development with confidence in our decisions. The workflow we reviewed requires fast, clear calculations from geology to economics across every scenario. Done manually, it could take months. With geonomics, the same results are delivered practically instantly, in just days. Check it out on our website.